Oh, we'll just go from here. Don't care for doing it. Okay. Hello, David.
Hello, Matt.
You all right, mate?
Fancy seeing you here.
Oh, I can't believe it. And especially with Geddy and the boys behind you.
Well, I got my friends around. I mean, they're looking a bit a bit wooden, to be honest.
70s, a bit 70s.
Yeah, it's a bit 70s.
So we're going to do Rush in the 70s at the moment. But just before we start, how did you discover Rush, David?
It was through school friends. So it was when I was in, I think it must have been the 5th year. So I'd been about 15 or 16, getting interested in music for the first time seriously.
Yeah.
I saw, some of my mates when we were hanging out at the weekends wearing these T-shirts with this word Rush written on it, and I didn't know I didn't know it was a band. I thought, is this drugs or something? Don't know what's going on here. And then it turned out, there you go. You see,
Rush,
a bit like that one,
almost.
And then some of my mates were sort of into Rush. I was getting into sort of more traditional English progressive rock music at the time, and Rush were kind of loved by a lot of the heavy rock boys. They like that, but there were sort of prog elements to it as well. So
they were very much a Kerrang band for me. I mean, Kerrang was the magazine that we all read at the time, and Kerrang used to have. I mean, even though by that point I got into metal and stuff, Kerrang still covered them, but they were they're obviously they're into the 80s stuff by then, so they weren't quite so metal. But I discovered them when I was about 17 at college. Yeah, a lad had a tape of them who lent it to me. And I think it was Hemispheres was the first one I heard.
Yeah,
I really liked. I suppose about 17, and I liked Hemispheres. And then I got All the World Stage. And it was always, when I was a kid, it was always right up to Moving Pictures. And I never really moved past that until the last. Probably I saw them on the last UK tour when they played loads of 80s stuff. I got into a lot of the 80s stuff then, which I really liked. Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're going to do album by album. And we'll start off with the first one. Shall we start off with, I've got my notes.
Rush.
With John Rutsey on the drums.
Yep.
So this is very much a different band, isn't it? It's very.
It was a different band, and it's interesting the way that they kind of evolved, because the band was originally started by Alex Lifeson, John Rutsey, and another guy who played bass and sang. And the name Rush came about because John Rutsey's brother suggested it when they needed a name to play their first gig. It was the classic thing. We haven't got a name. We need something sort of short and snappy. What about Rush? Oh, that'll do. And then apparently the singer stroke bass player decided to do something else rather than turn up for their second gig. So they got Gary Weinrab, I think is Geddy Lee's birth name, in to kind of sort of substitute for him initially. And then, of course, he joined the band. The other guy didn't come back. So, then in the fullness of time, in 1974, they made this album.
They're effectively a sort of bar band at this point, when they sort of playing the local bars and doing all the cover circuit. And they sort of came through that. They did a cover of Buddy Holly's "Not Fade Away." They were, like I said, basically a bar band that sounded a lot like Led Zeppelin, but extremely.
Sounded an awful lot like Led Zeppelin. What I think is really funny is you read all these interviews with them. I read one with Alex Life, somebody saying, "Oh yeah, the guitarists I was really influenced by were people like Eric Clapton and Jimi Hendrix," and he also mentioned some of the prog guys like Steve Hackett, for example.
Yeah.
But he they don't really mention Led Zeppelin, despite the fact that on that first album they sound just like Led Zeppelin.
I mean, I was listening to the first album the other day, and my wife came in, and the first thing she says, "Yeah, you got Led Zeppelin on again." No, it's Rush.
Yeah, exactly.
The first one doesn't. I mean, the first one sounds so different to the later material. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It does. I mean, it's the John Rutsey, bless his heart.
He's a perfectly competent rock drummer, isn't he? He's fine.
He was all right, but compared to sort of what came later, he was plodding a bit.
So wasn't everybody at that, compared to
exactly. The songs were very traditional rock song structures. There was nothing sort of bizarre about that. They were in the Zeppelin. I sort of think just in the way that the instrumental bits were sort of structured, a bit of Wishbone Ash type of thing going on. All that sort of
So it's very much British rock influence.
Yes,
Canadians bar band playing British influenced rock, but I mean, Working Man's a great tune. Perfectly good for it. There's a lot of bands that sound like this at the time, like Budgie and things like that. And those
Budgie, Budgie were described as the British Rush. I think that was because Burke Shelley's voice is quite similar to Alex Lifeson's, to Geddy Lee's.
Budgie are brilliant as well. I mean,
I love Budgie. One of my wife's favourite bands, Budgie.
We'll have to do a Budgie one, David. We'll have to do a Budgie video. Yeah, not enough Budgie out there.
The best album titles ever as well. But anyway.
Yeah, Bands That Have Been Destroyed. No, really. Okay, so first album, perfectly good debut album. Slightly, not as amazing as probably what went on. So, Fly By Night, 75, a year later. So this is when things start to change, isn't it?
Yeah, they were sort of moving into some slightly more interesting areas. The song I think which sort of really does that is probably By Tor and the Snow Dog. That's
the one where they've obviously had the Genesis albums out.
Oh yes, they have. Yeah, and
7/4 War for her, and it's like the bit where they they take the parts. That's very Genesis to do it like that, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And then, of course, it was also the first album which featured Neil Peart on drums, and also as their lyricist. Interesting times.
I think that's really. I mean, that's quite a cool thing. Neil Peart did the lyrics as well. I think that's really cool as well. That he,
yeah.
Obviously, Anthem is the one. It's a great tune, but. There was the whole Ayn Rand thing, and I must admit, when I was listening to these records, I had no idea what that was all about.
No, neither did I.
Of that whatsoever. To be honest.
A lot is made of it. I mean, we'll come on to talk about 2112 in a bit, but a lot is made of it. But I think it was a phase to an extent. It wasn't.
And I think they talked it down later on, didn't they? When you're a young person, it's very easy to take to just absorb these things without taking them in, without analysing them. But later on, they said, like I say, it was something they just sort of went through at the time, wasn't it?
But with Fly By Night, the lyrics were as they were on the next album, even more so on the next album. That very kind of sort of sword and sorcery. I've been reading Tolkien. That whole sort of vibe that was going around in the mid-70s, and it was very popular. And
Zeppelin were the same, weren't they? Zeppelin's lyrics were.
Oh, I mean, yeah, Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant's lyrics were references bloody hobbits in a couple of songs, but
same as the Heap, where Uriah Heep were that way. There's a lot of hobbit bothering going on in them days, weren't there?
There was a lot of it about, and it was kind of. They were dabbling with sort of some proggy elements on Fly By Night, but I think on the whole it was still pretty much a rock album, albeit that the Peart's playing sort of lifted the as well.
And also, it's a good. I mean, one of the things you think of when you think of, this is kind of the start of prog metal, really. But when you listen to them, they had the groove of a 70s rock band. They weren't like this metronomic, clicky, horrible thing that prog metal has sort of become in some ways. And there's some brilliant prog metal about, but, especially with the drums on prog metal songs, there's this sort of tight, clicky, grooveless, soulless thing. And Rush weren't like that at all. Rush had more of a Zeppelin type metronome. They had this kind of, definitely had a 3-piece band jamming groove.
Yes. If you listen to some of the live recordings, I mean, this afternoon I was listening to to the live disc that comes with the re-release of Hemispheres, and they're playing 2112, and that's got a real sort of they're almost jamming some of it out.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, there's just because they invented progressive metal, I suppose. They were by far one of the best examples of it, weren't they? So,
I don't necessarily think of them as being a progressive metal band. Really,
no, hard rock band, heavy metal band.
I think they were. I think they were Rush.
I mean, if you take Zeppelin and mix a bit of Genesis and Yes in there, that's kind of Rush, isn't it?
Because I didn't think of them as a prog band at all at the time.
They were always a heavy metal band, weren't they?
Yeah, they're a heavy rock band. But I was listening to the likes of Genesis and Yes. That was prog to my ears at the time. But of course, and at this stage in their arc, I think they were still pretty much basically a very tight 3-piece rock band.
And a brilliant one, an absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
We're on to Crest of Steel. So this is where the prog lurks a bit more, isn't it?
Oh yes, this was the first album where they were obviously they'd been cracking out the old Genesis albums and possibly cracking out some of the recreational substances as well.
All Day is quite Zeppelin-y, quite punky, isn't it? It's really good.
Yeah.
I really like Lakeside Park. That's a really good tune. And then it goes into the sort of the Necromancers, where the proggy, hobbity sort of thing arrives, isn't it? And there's sort of loads of bits put together, basically, isn't it? Yeah,
the Necromancer, it's got that sort of structure of a sort of a classic prog album in the way that it's done, and it's just bits and pieces. The Necromancer and the Fountain of Lamnef, both of those are sort of that type of structure. I haven't listened to Caress of Steel for, it must be close on 30 years until I listened to it the other day, and I really, really enjoyed it. I sort of thought of it, in my mind, it was like not their strongest, but when I listened to it, I really, really enjoyed it, even though the lyrics are just dire. But,
Yeah, I mean, I thought riff-wise, it's quite Sabbathy, some of it. It's got a bit of a Sabbath feel, quite heavy. It's of its time, but it's certainly I really enjoyed it. But like I say, it's got that. It's if you have to enjoy it for what it is, and what it is a really well made progressive rock album, metal with like somewhere between metal and prog, and of its time with that sort of sword and sorcery thing going, isn't it?
Yeah, it was, and it wasn't terribly successful.
Almost lost they call it Down the Tubes tour, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and they were like sort of after that they were considering the possibility of jacking it all in.
Yeah,
and the recording of the next album, 2112, which was really their breakthrough record, they were saying if this isn't a success, then we're gonna stop.
So just going to 2112 then. So 2112 is it was the breakthrough, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it's one of the best thought of Rush albums to this day. It's not, to be honest, I'm going to say this and probably get shot down by anyone watching this video. It's not one of my favourite Rush albums. I don't really get it. I've never really. Perhaps it's because I like it, but I don't love it.
I think it's a record of two halves, literally.
Yeah, you got the long piece side one with all the the overture and all that in it.
I think side one's pretty good. I like side one, but I think there's a bit of filler on side two. I'm not sure about songs like A Passage to Bangkok.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun one when they played it live and so on. But I thought that 2112, the sort of the title track, if you like, the sort of the sidelong first one was pretty good, and I love the riffs in that.
Yeah, the riffs are awesome in it. Yeah.
The overture at the start and then into the Temples of Syrinx is fantastic.
They did that when I saw them. They did the overture bit into the That was really exciting. I mean, it's awesome. Yeah, but I think they were to go on to make better records. To be honest,
I agree. I think they absolutely did, but that was like sort of, and also it was the first sort of glimmerings, I suppose, of their fully fledged style. You know what they were about.
Into the they mastered that sidelong epic thing, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
So the following record. So this is what I had this on vinyl when I was a kid. I bought this from the charity shop in Wellingborough, and I used to listen to it all the time on vinyl. So this was one of my key reference points to Rush, the live All the World's a Stage.
All the World's a Stage. Double LP it was, wasn't it?
Which is the basic. It's effectively it's a live best of, isn't it?
Oh, it's brilliant. It's just, in fact, I think the version of 2112 on that is better than the version on the 2112 album.
And by Tour and the Snow Dog, it's more exciting.
Yeah.
It's a really sound. I mean, I don't know how treated it was and how much overdubbing was going, but it sounds like they're playing live.
I've got a recollection that not much is the answer to that. It
doesn't sound like. I mean, but just bloody hell, they were good players. Oh my god, they were so good.
Yeah.
They were so good players. I mean, and there was a real like that thing where telepathic thing between them, wasn't there?
Yes.
So they, obviously there was a magic between those guys who were, playing together so well. It was just phenomenal. I love it.
I mean, they play together all the time, and I guess that's the benefit of being in a band where, you do have that stability of lineup. And by that time, that particular trio had been together for, 3-4 years or whatever it was.
They were doing 200 shows a year, apparently. That's
doing masses of shows. Yeah, they don't need to rehearse because they're playing every night. They're playing live every night. Yeah.
So I mean, and bands. I mean, I don't know of any rock bands who do 200 shows a year anymore.
No.
It's inconceivable to me that anyone on the, our level, post rock, psychedelic rock, prog rock, any of the bands on our scene would do 200 shows a year. I don't know anybody who.
No. There aren't 200 shows to do, actually, to be honest.
You can't build. I mean, like when with Rush, they toured with Kiss and UFO and built it up and then by the time they got to 2112, they'd finally connected with an audience. They just worked, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They slogged it through, and All the World's a Stage. It's kind of, in some ways, I suppose, it's a sort of, it's a marker in the sand because
end of part one, isn't it?
End of sort of phase one of Rush.
Yeah.
Because then they moved on to doing things a little bit differently and introduced the joys of synthesizers into the band.
Which is always, I think, always a bonus. I think that's always.
Yeah.
I think we're both in agreement. All the World Stage is a great record.
It's a fantastic record.
And I think for me, really, of all those early Rush records, that would be the one I'd listen to out of those first four, and then the live one. I think that's my favourite.
Yeah,
because there's just no messing about with it, isn't there? So, okay, so we're on to Farewell to Kings, which I really like.
I love Farewell to Kings. It was the first Rush album I heard. It was loaned to me by a friend. Because I said to him, what's their best song? And he said, Xanadu is their best song. I said, well, yeah, I'd like to hear that. He said, well, you can borrow the album. So in fact, I'm not sure I ever gave it back. I think it might still be down there somewhere.
Yeah.
That was the first Rush album I heard. I'd heard Spirit of Radio on the radio, but I hadn't heard any of their sort of records before I heard that one, and it's great. And the first album with synthesizers on it, he really uses the synthesizer well.
Yeah,
it's
I agree.
Adding colour to the album without sort of overwhelming it. It's basically like Rush Plus.
Yeah, it's a great. I wonder how they played those parts. I don't know. When I saw them, I think they used a limited amount of backing tracks, not a lot.
Just a little bit. They resisted that in the 70s and 80s.
They had the floor synths, didn't they? The Moogs.
They used Taurus pedals and both Leanne Lifeson were playing a huge amount of pedals. Yeah.
How they, I mean, when I saw them, it was just incredible. They were all jumping around playing different instruments. It was just phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah,
one of the best bands I've ever seen. I mean, you saw them in the 70s, didn't you?
I saw them on the first time I saw them was on the Hemispheres tour, and they were extraordinarily good.
Wow.
And then I saw them. Let me just think. When would it have been? I saw them on the Hemispheres tour. I missed them on Permanent Waves, but I saw them on the tour that produced Moving Pictures. The after the one that produced all the Exit Stage Left, I should say. I was at one of the shows on that album.
They didn't do because they didn't tour the UK much, did they?
Actually, more than you think.
Yeah.
So round about that sort of Hemispheres Permanent Waves period, they were doing the sort of the medium-sized venues, the city halls, and the Bristol. So Yvette saw them at Bristol Colston Hall and Hemispheres. I saw them in Newcastle, at Newcastle City Hall.
So I don't remember them touring in the UK much in the 90s. I don't remember them doing.
No, I don't think they did. I think they were mostly North America and South America, actually, where they were very successful.
Yeah, they had that Rio thing. So back to Farewell to Kings. So what's your favourite on Farewell to Kings?
I think it's probably Xanadu.
Xanadu's great, isn't it? Yeah. It always put me off that title because was that ELO one that's not very good.
ELO and Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, but I love ELO. That's particularly the deer in.
It was not their finest moment, was it?
Awful, yeah. It put me off ELO for years. I love ELO. But I like Xanadu as well. I like the song Close to Heart.
Yeah.
Brilliant bit of pop songwriting.
Closer to the Heart was the sort of the big sing-along number that they used to play live.
It's a lovely song. It was so
everyone would just join in with that one.
So this was recorded in Rockfield in Wales.
Yep.
You imagine what a culture shock Monmouthshire must be to some Canadians.
Yes.
So I hope they enjoyed wet weather. But
yeah, well, yeah.
I think we both can agree that it's a cracker, isn't it? It's very short as well. It's only 37 minutes long, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually that in some ways that's quite nice. They were sort of they made an album. They said what they had to say and they buggered off.
40 minutes top for records. I'm a big fan of this. I've been going like this for years. Right, okay, so we all like that one. So the final one of the 70s is Hemispheres.
Yes.
Which is even more prog.
That was peak prog, I think.
Peak prog, isn't it? So
yeah.
And this was I had this on tape when I was about 17, and I used to listen to it all the time on my tape Walkman, walking around Wellingborough. I didn't have a girlfriend. You'd be surprised.
Surprised.
I think I got into Rush because I heard Voivod talking about them, and Voivod's big Rush fans, and I think that's how I discovered Rush. And so a lot of the, and you can hear like Metallica, the influence of Rush on Metallica, and they influenced so many bands. They influenced, Smashing Pumpkins, the Foo Fighters, and
hugely influential. And in fact, a lot of the bands on our circuit, the sort of the prog circuit, they've got Russian. In fact, there's one I won't name them who basically they just are Rush.
They do Rush. They do a bit of Rush. We can do a bit of Rush today.
They don't play any Rush songs, but they sound just like Rush.
And I think one of the things about Rush to young people that's very appealing is that they're energetic and they're incredibly good musicians, which is very exciting to, as a young player myself. It's not necessarily something I'm looking for now, but when I was 16, 17, 18, La Villa Strangiato, and it was just like, oh my God, this is just incredible.
That is a crazy, crazy piece of music. It's probably my favourite from the Hemispheres album. I just love it.
I don't think there's a weak one on it. This one, I think this is their. I think everyone's a winner on.
Yes, they're all fantastic.
So, and if I was to think of the, I think a lot of prog wanders off into nonsense and people basically running out of ideas. And I think Hemispheres is the sort of because it's quite short and the songs are quite lengthy. They're packed full of good ideas, and I think it's the if I were to play one of the best examples of progressive music and progressive rock of the 70s, I think Hemispheres is up there with Bill Bruford's solo stuff, King Crimson. If I want to play, this is progressive rock done really, really well in a non-cringy. You don't have to go. Oh, sorry about this bit, because it's not. It's all good, and you can hear
even the sort of the title track, which is a side of vinyl.
Yeah,
it's still only 18 minutes long, which I say only. That's long. That's a long song.
But they played with a lot of energy, wasn't it? There was a lot of there was a lot more energetic than a lot of the other progressive bands, I suppose, because they come from that hard rock background. But when I first heard Live in a Strange Yatta, I was obsessed with it. I thought it was brilliant. I just absolutely loved it. And then if you listen to what Metallica were doing, like Master of Puppets and their sort of Justice for All sort of period, it's another one where a hard rock band is basically playing progressive rock. And Smashing Pumpkins, Foo Fighters, all those sort of bands, when they go a bit prog, what they tend to be referencing isn't necessarily it's Rush, because that was so. It's just for young people. It's a very exciting sound. It's a very because it's just really great players playing at the absolute edge of their ability, and like the Villa Strange Yatta, I believe they cut it live as well. Which is
interesting. That is mental.
It's so hard to do, So
how many takes was that? Yeah,
I think it was like days and days. Yeah, they did 3 separate takes. I was looking on the Wikipedia page. So they said the band said it set out to record the song in one take. However, it ultimately required 3 separate takes. According to Lee, we spent more time recording Strange Yatta than the entire Fly By Night album. It was our first piece without any vocals at all. So each section had to stand up as a theme and a musical structure of its own, which, to be honest, it sounds like it. It sounds like there's so much. There's so much going on, isn't there?
There's a lot happening, a lot of ideas in the piece,
which is what you want, really, isn't it?
It is, and that is my favourite from Hemispheres. Even though I love the whole album, Live in a Strange Yatta is the one. And they every time I've seen them a few times, they always play it. It's a real sort of crowd pleaser. You can't go wrong with that.
Yeah, there's a really good version on Exit Stage Left, isn't there?
There is, excellent. Every version I've heard of it has been superb.
Because so what would you say? That's the end of the Rush 70s stuff, isn't it? So,
yes.
How would you describe them as a band in the 70s? What do you think was their? I think they're a band who basically started off as a sort of Zeppelin type rock band who took in just really open. I think they're truly a great example of a band who were progressive, not a band that just developed one style. So there's 2 definitions of progressive, isn't there? There's a certain, you have to sound exactly like a certain period of British rock, or a band that takes on new influences all the time. And, they had a stage that was progressive rock, but that wasn't where they stayed, was it?
No, and I think Rush they're an excellent example of a band who played the music that they wanted to play. I got the impression that, so maybe at the start of it, they're wanting to play to a particular audience to get a name, but as they progressed, and certainly once they got past 2112, we're just going to do what we want, and either you like it or you don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I hugely admire that. I love.
So they're progressive in that sense, but I don't think they're not a prog band in my view. They're Rush, and no one sounds quite like them, and they ploughed their own furrow.
Yeah,
starting in the 70s and continued to evolve through the 80s and later.
Yeah, they were one-off, weren't they? What a special band.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky I'm so glad we saw them. I'm so glad that lucky enough to grow up with it, because, and I think, the influence, I reckon if you listen to a lot of Iron Maiden, a lot of Iron Maiden's early work sounds like Rush.
Yeah.
Or Rush feel. I mean, I don't know I think it might be that they had similar influences. So, like, Maiden are very much Genesis meets Led Zeppelin and Sabbath. I think, Rush came from a very much Genesis meets Led Zeppelin and Sabbath thing as well. But
Steve Harris loves his prog, doesn't he? bit of a fan. So
but Rush were doing it 5 years ahead of Maiden. So I mean,
they were, yeah.
I love Iron Maiden as well. Don't get me wrong, but Rush were one of the first bands to mix, your Genesis and your Slayer, your Sabbath and your Led Zeppelin. I think
all those influences. Yeah,
but I think I just think they're just such a great band and hugely inspirational to me as a musician in the way that they were progressive, and they literally did. When they did 2112, that was not a commercial record. They just didn't get away with it. It was just we're going to do this, and I don't care. So
it's sold shed loads.
But there's a message for that, isn't there? That quite often the bands that stand out and retain an audience, especially on a cult level, are the ones that don't give a monkeys what people think.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lesson to be drawn from that, in that I always kind of think that some people, especially in the progressive scene, they're like ticking boxes. It's like they're going, I have a bit of Genesis here, and I wonder if people like it if I put a bit more Pink Floyd in here and a little bit more Stephen Wilson there, perhaps more people. And I think, you can be commercial as a prog rock band by attempting to sound like Genesis.
Yes.
That's like being Kylie Minogue, really. I mean, that's just being, you're ticking off a box in a market. Whereas you listen to a band like Rush, or actually, to be fair, most of the original progressive rock bands, none of those bands were going, got to sound exactly like what we've done before. All of them, literally all of them, moved past that sound, didn't they?
Because they, I think in some cases it was because they wanted to do something a bit different, a bit more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And there was nothing that had gone before. So, King Crimson and Genesis and Yes and so on, they had to invent progressive rock because it didn't exist beforehand.
They invented progressive rock, and then they all transcended it. But none of them went, I've got to sound exactly like the last album.
No.
But whereas sometimes progressive rock bands now, their philosophy is, well, we've got to be a progressive rock band, which is completely at odds with what the philosophy of the progressive rock. It's like progressive rock against progressive rock.
Yes. Yeah. Prog against prog.
Yeah, it's like, it's completely against the ethos of the bands that inspired it. It's bizarre, man. It's like the whole thing of trying to sound like something that's happened before. Well, that's completely against what all those original bands were doing and what's so exciting about them, and especially Rush, who were just phenomenal. But but they were a classic example of a band that, a Rush record from 1974 doesn't sound anything like a Rush record from 1989.
No, very different.
Completely different band. So, right, okay. Yeah. Are we done with Rush in the 70s?
I think we probably are. I think we'll have to come back at some point and do the 80s and maybe beyond.
I think we'll perhaps do it in a couple of weeks if you fancy it.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good idea.
All right, mate. David, thank you so much. Please go and check out David, the Bad Elephant YouTube page, Bad Elephant on Facebook, Bad Elephant. Go and look them up. They've got loads of amazing bands. What you got coming up next, David?
So we've got the new Tom Slatter albums out at the end of September, start of October. And then we've got new ones there's one from Fractal Mirror coming out as well, new album from them, and a lot more stuff this year, which I can't tell you about at the moment.
Well, I'll have you back again in a few weeks anyway. Thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Let's press stop on the recording if I can.